Conversations are good. Yeah. There's a new handout available. I realized the pastor was long-winded this morning. Plus the baptism, plus the Holy connection. So we'll start in 60 seconds. Where 2 or 3 are gathered. Maybe if I slurp my coffee really loud. Yeah. You ask a German, wie geht's? And the German says, gates are fine, knees not so good. You think we should come to Bible study? Ann is calling everybody to Bible study. Why start down? That's okay. It is, that's good. Don't we love to see? All right, as we continue to look at Ecclesiastes, we'll start at chapter 5. We said last week we took our time going through the first few chapters, just to kind of set the tone, and the rest of the book builds off of that tone that's been set. And so we did 3 and 4 last time. We'll get it, hopefully, Lord willing, through 5 and more today. 2 objectives again, to help avoid common traps found in society. It's just amazing, too, how the Lord brings everything together. The readings for today, together with the news that's going on, and the Bible study that we're looking at in Ecclesiastes, and it just all builds on that same theme. Again, the common traps that are found in society. But we do have help by God's grace through His Word to travel through this life with Christ at the wheel, and that's really the key. Now, how many people are not driving with Christ at the wheel? They're trying to drive themselves, and that's not going to go well. Or people who had Christ driving at the wheel, but kicked them out of the car. That's not going well either. So to help us then with those 2 objectives, there are 2 key thoughts that also flow through Ecclesiastes, and that the familiar words that we like to always repeat: everything under the sun in and of itself is meaningless. And so the importance then of the role of God in our life. Sad to say, as alluded to earlier, more and more people are missing that even as Christians. So, chapter 5, let's look at verses 1 to 7, standing in awe of God. Chapter 5, verses 1 to 7. Barb, do you have those words for us? All right, thank you. So there is a transition that takes place. Again, as we indicated, we're not going to spend as much time on the remaining chapters, repeating the similar thought process, but it becomes a little more personal. As Barb was reading that, you can almost hear God talking to Job. When God finally talks to Job and pushes him against the wall and says, brace yourself like a man, right? Again, keep in mind who you're talking to, Job, and what he's capable of doing. So, guard your steps. What is meant with the words, guard your steps? I mean, we could spend, an hour just on these 7 verses, but we won't, Lord willing. But we could. So what is meant by guard your steps? Watch your ways, okay? What else?
Arm yourself. Give
Arm
yourself the right equipment.
Arm yourself. Give yourself the right equipment. Okay, walk in paths of righteousness. Again, think of Psalm 1, right? You could add that. Meditate on the word of the Lord day and night.
Go for the right reason.
Go for the right reason, okay? Be humble. Don't think you know it all. We're going to build on that theme some more, right? Come to listen and grow, right? And that's really our tagline too, right? We come to glorify God. We're not here to be entertained. We come to glorify God. He is worthy of it. And as we're here to glorify God, we have the opportunity to grow. Some Sundays more than others. All depends what we're going through. And then we have the opportunity then to go with what we've grown into. James emphasizes too, out of the same mouth, praises and curses, right? So we come to church, we give this show, and then not long after, we're cursing God in various ways. That should not be. Guard your steps. Take this seriously. Psalm 122, familiar words. The psalmist said, rejoice with those who said to me, let us go to the house of the Lord. Why does it take age for people to get this? As a general rule of thumb. What? What was it? Maturity, okay? Why else do you think it takes age for us to realize with the psalmist, I look forward to going for the right reasons?
Well, if you develop more wisdom and you see the folly of your earlier ways,
Okay.
see the mistakes, you're able to view them in the rear view mirror, and you just recognize that you've been foolish and you want to turn a different way.
Okay, you see the folly of your ways of your youth. You want to turn a different way. You come to realize what really is important and want to make that a priority. Dan first.
For me, it's just knowing, okay, I'm getting closer to that time when the Lord's going to call me. So,
Okay.
better prepared. It's just knowing that it's coming. So,
Yeah, that recognition of, I am getting older, and so that day when I have to face the Lord is coming closer. Realizing, though, it could come at any time, right? Ed?
Meaningless, nothing else matters.
Meaningless, nothing else matters. Yeah, we come to that as part of that maturity and realizing maybe where I have been focused really is folly. And again, we get it, right? People, even people who have grown up in the church may still not always come for the right reason, but Lord willing, they leave. I'm glad we came. We fought sleep mattress. We fought the kids not being cooperative or whatever it might be. Because you do get fed here. Or Psalm 84, I'd rather be a doorkeeper at the house of the God than dwell in the tents of the wicked. What does that emphasize? What's he saying in your own words?
Better to be here.
Better to be here. Why?
Be in the house of the Lord.
You want to be in the house of the Lord, recognizing how the Lord puts life in perspective.
He's giving us something. We're here to hear His word.
Okay?
And we'll grow with that. Better prepares us.
All right, we're here to hear His Word. We recognize that we can hear His Word anywhere, but again, He wants us to gather together with like-minded people to grow up in our faith, and we're not being like Elijah, think, am I the only one left? No, we are encouraging and building up one another as we gather together. There was a hand over here first. Ellie.
Part of what I was going to say, you just said encouraging each other, but also I think God is our strength and our refuge, and we don't get that unless we are amongst fellow Christians, because part of that is encouragement.
Okay, yeah, recognizing God as our refuge and strength, and we get encouragement from Him and encouragement from one another as we come together. Steve.
Society isn't going to lead you on a path of righteousness. It's going to take you down the wrong road every time.
Yeah, society, and that's one of the points too. Society, who's looking out for your best interest? Society may think it is, but really God is. And so we want to stay focused on the one who does have our best interests in mind. And so, I'd rather be a doorkeeper of the house of the Lord. You were going to say.
Well, I was just going to add on the Psalm 84, he says, better in the courts of the Lord 1,000, but you never went into the house of God. You only were in the courts. But to be a doorkeeper, to be standing at the entrance, is better than to live in the tents of the wicked.
Right? So, again, to recognize the opportunities that the Lord puts before us to worship Him, especially in a formal opportunity as we do on Sundays. Because what does that reflect about Him in our life? As we take these passages from the Psalm and also Ecclesiastes. That He is the priority in my life. And I want to please Him because of what He has done for me. And what's one of the ways I can show my thankfulness to Him is by learning more about Him and giving Him honor and praise and glorifying Him. And how did this get lost in church circles? Again, the attitude of the psalmist. I'm not saying it's completely lost, but just saying we do recognize, not just here, but you talk even to other denominations, they're facing the same situations, and COVID just seemed to highlight even more the problems that we're facing the church as far as apathy and stuff. How did this get lost? It's not one right answer here. Steve.
We've seen so much of societal items get brought into the church. They're changing the meaning of the gospel. What does it mean to be God? So we're just chipping away at the strength of God and allowing society to rule, if you will, in the circle of the church in many ways.
All right, so we've touched on that before too, right? The church, instead of raising up society, has allowed society to infiltrate the church and have a say in what the church is teaching. Dave, did you hear?
I was just going to say, there's a song called "You're Drifting Too Far from the Shore," and where you start drifting along a little bit, like what COVID did, but I feel it. And pretty soon, the other things start attracting you, and pretty soon you're so far from the shore. It's a real.
Yeah, the song he's mentioning, you're drifting too far from the shore, right? And that, how easily that can happen, right? You're not paying attention, and all of a sudden, boom. It's not. Coming to church needs to be intentional too. Again, recognizing we want to come to worship the Lord with our fellow believers because of what takes place there. So that needs to be intentional. Even when you don't want to, right? There was another yes. Yeah, all right. We look to the government rather than to God, and how many people in the last few years especially, even more so, have equated openly how the government is God. And even officials thinking that. Again, nothing new under the sun. Remember the leader that God struck down for claiming and being willing to be called God?
Well, I think you just mentioned that too, and look what happened in Germany after the war thing. So disenfranchised with everything else. Looked at the National Socialist Party, the Nazis, and they looked at all the other ways. Let the government and look what happened after that. The evil, the wickedness. That's what I want to see after that.
Yeah, instead of looking.
I guess there's a saying,
Yeah, some of the thought process of how we start looking to other entities rather than God himself. So again, we look to creation rather than the creator. And where does that oftentimes come from? I mean, you think too of generations getting comfortable. Have we gotten too comfortable as a generation? You know, sometimes what is it that draws people back to God? And people noticed that with the first Gulf War in 1990-ish. You know, how the nation for 6 months, whatever, got on their knees and so forth, and then the war was over, and then we went back to our ways. To the second Gulf War, the nation didn't really get on its knees, it was observed. Just from that time frame, right, our nation already had drifted to the point where when disaster strikes, we don't cry out to God, we started crying out to ourselves. Michael?
In light of your preaching of the laws, morality, sexual immorality, all that stuff, even folks like Bill Maher is like seeing insanity. He's liberal still, but even he's seeing insanity in both politics of transgenderism and the force imposition of that.
Sure. So the influence, again, the influence of society, and even some outside of the church can see that that's not all a healthy thing. Definitely, Ed. And then,
I don't know all the details, but I heard that the Wisconsin Synod paid off its debt during the Great Depression.
yes, it did pay off its debt during the Great Depression. It took a lot of, what was it? Yeah, offerings were never higher during that time frame, right? Again, so we can get too comfortable, and then the Lord oftentimes pulls back those blessings to wake us up. You know, with Israel, he would do that. Never removing his mercy. His motive is always pure, Elaine.
I used to hear the saying a lot, you know, that we are created with a God-sized vacuum, that we try to, that can only be filled by God, but that our culture is more and more trying to fill that with other things, even environmentalism. It's almost like they think they can be God by controlling our atmosphere, by everything they're doing. So they're filling it with their own thought of what God is, but it's not the God that's ever going to complete them and fulfill them.
You're right. I mean, again, in a sense, we are a vacuum, and what fills that void, again, is important. And unfortunately, you know, with each generation, it seems like less of the church is filling that void and more of society is filling that void. And again, COVID just accelerated that as we got comfortable staying home. Another thing that it's impacted too, not to beat a horse, so to speak, but right, the institutions. Institutions have let society down. And you know, young people see that. It's not an excuse, but again, government, church, companies, right, overall. And so then they equate all of that as being evil. They can't separate the false church, the church that's let them down, with God. The priest scandal and so forth, well, that's God. Well, they can't separate God himself, and he doesn't tolerate. Just like with David, yes, he allowed that to happen in David's life, but what did he say? I was displeased, and there were consequences. So we need to be faithful at that message. You know, like Ken Ham would say, you know, we're good at teaching the flood, Noah and the ark, as a cutesy little story with our flannel graph. We don't teach the real truths. And so what do we expect happens to that generation? They think of the Bible as a cutesy little story that's for Sunday mornings for 30 minutes, not realizing how the Bible is there to impact their life for good. And then what does impact their life 5, 6 days, 7 days a week? Society's influence, evolution, and immorality, and so forth, Steve.
Technology is also, it's a boom, but it's been a very bad thing on the church. Too many people can get on technology, and there's too much wrong information in technology that people are getting. And it's hurting, because they get led down the wrong way. Or it leads to, oh, I'm in charge, not, God.
Yeah, again, pros and cons of technology. That leads to the next one, define a fool, verse 4. How would you define a fool?
A friend of mine in high school, long story short, we disagreed on what we were going to do on Friday night, and she said, Jeanette, I'm going. God forgives. I sin, God forgives. But at what cost? Jesus died for my sins. Doesn't that make a difference? I don't know.
Yeah, that logic, right? So like with your friend, I'm going to go ahead and do this anyway. I'm going to go out, and I know I'm going to sin against God, and then He'll forgive me, right? I mean, kind of like, in a sense, David, he knew better, and yet went and did it anyway. Paul talks about that, right? You know, just because we have grace, does that mean we sin more? No, right? That's supposed to be the motivation. And thankfully, God does not call our life when we're in the midst of our sin. You know, again, there's that state of grace and so forth, but we could have a longer discussion sometime about that. Have I lost, or am I still in that state of grace? Forgiveness. So that's a good point. What else? How else would you define a fool?
Well, just looking at verse 4, someone who makes promises that he has no intention of keeping.
Yeah, someone who makes promises but no intention of keeping. So again, it emphasizes it's not necessarily one who doesn't have the capacity to learn, it's one who refuses to learn. And again, the whole thing about knowledge and wisdom. You can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you don't have wisdom, what good is it? Right? You know, and the fool in verse 1, right, lacking morals and God, one who goes through the motions. Like, what does Jesus say? I desire mercy, not sacrifice. So not just going through the motions. And, you know, so it's an opportunity to examine our own hearts. We're just going through the motions. And then carry on. We have the capacity to learn, but we're refusing to learn. When is it good to take or make a vow? Again, interesting how the gospel reading addresses that for us too.
When you know that you can fulfill the vow.
All right, when you know you can fulfill that vow, with the caveat, it depends again what that vow is. Is it necessary to make a vow? Right, you know what we learn in the second commandment, swearing in uncertain things or needless swearing. Steve?
It's simple as a yes or no. I think it's what you're in the lesson today versus making vows. You should, you know, can I do this? Yes. Will you do this? No or yes? Not make a vow. I will, because you may not be able to do it. You
Right.
may not have the capacity. So don't make something you can't fulfill.
You know, that's the general rule of thumb, right? Let your yes be yes, your no be no. Are there times, though, when vows are okay to make and probably good to make? I mean, we can think of, right, your wedding vows, right? And not just to be flippant about it. You do intend to keep that. Confirmation is another vow. We try to emphasize to those confirmands before they make that promise. Know what you are making, and if you have no intention, don't even make it. I think, again, we've said this before, we need to do a better job of not just passing on 8th graders and confirming them just because they're in 8th grade. I know we'll get parents' wrath on that, but who are we fooling? We're fooling. We're trying to fool God. He's not going to be fooled, and we're really hurting that individual and that family. You know, I mean, you know, it's interesting too, right? A family will know that maybe a sin is wrong and they're all for it. You go, pastor, you preach against that sin until it's my family member. How dare you say that's a sin? What changed? Did God change all of a sudden? Did the Pope have a talk with them and say, hey, God in heaven, you know, I am the Pope. We're going to change this. No, God doesn't change. The Pope may. The Mormon president may. ELCA may. Does that mean we should? Yes.
When I was confirmed, I don't think I understood the importance of the vow at 13.
Mm-hmm.
I just did it because I don't know, I shouldn't say it that way, but it was required. I have to take a vow. Some of my classmates did not remain faithful.
Yep.
So it's a danger.
You know, again, there's a fine line in there. And, you know, speaking more of families who have given no indication that they're even serious, they're just sending their kids to send their kids and go through confirmation. They're not coming themselves. There's no basis to support that child in confirmation. I mean, that child can't drive, so who's going to them to church. You weren't bringing them to church before. So it's just that we ask the questions, and right, we try to make clear what you are promising, what you are saying through that promise. Because we can never fully grasp. Even marriage. How many on your wedding day fully grasp that vow you are making? Again, what that all entails. It sounds good. Yeah, I'll do that. And until, right? So again, it's not that we shouldn't make the vow, but we need to be careful when we make that vow, and that we, Lord willing, we intend to keep it. So when you made that, were you intending not to keep it? Even though you didn't understand it fully? No, you were intending to keep it. Right, Steve?
I think people in society don't understand the strength of a vow, especially the marriage vow. You have made a commitment for the rest of your life. At that point, you have a husband or your wife. Not that things get a little rough or little things or I get tired of things. You've committed every ounce of what you've done for the rest of your life with that person. But society doesn't see that. Yes.
Right. And you're right. The influence of society, even on our young people, right? I mean, I don't know if we even can fully grasp the impact that technology, like you said earlier, has on our youth with the Minecraft, you name it, all the different. Who are they talking to? Do parents even know who their children are talking to, playing that game against? In the middle of the night as well. And the influence that other person has on your child, all those things start seeping in. Again, that's getting too far afield. So again, bottom line, let us not be a fool. Give thanks that God has called us to trust in Him, and God gives us the means to grow in that trust and to encourage others to do the same. Chapter 5, verses 8 to 20. Let's look at 8 to 12 first of all. Got a reader for that? John?
If you see the poor oppressed in a district, and justice and rights denied, do not be surprised at such things, for one official is eyed by a higher one, and over them both are others higher still. The increase from the land is taken by all. The king himself profits from the field. Whoever loves money never has money enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with his income. This too is meaningless. As goods increase, so do those who consume them. And what benefit are they to the owner except to feast his eyes on them? The sleep of a laborer is sweet, but he eats little or much. But the abundance of a rich man permits him no sleep.
Okay, and 13 to the rest of that chapter. Greg?
I have seen a grievous evil under the sun, wealth hoarded to the harm of its owner, or wealth lost through some misfortune, so that when he has a son, there is nothing left for him. Naked a man comes from his mother's womb, and as he comes, so he departs. He takes nothing from his labor that he can carry in his hand. This too is a grievous evil. As a man comes, so he departs. And what does he gain, since he toils for the wind? All his days he eats in darkness, with great frustration, affliction, and anger. Then I realized that it is good and proper for a man to eat and drink, and to find satisfaction in his toilsome labor under the sun during the few days of life God has given him. For this is his lot. Moreover, when God gives any man wealth and possessions and enables him to enjoy them, to accept his lot and be happy in his work, this is a gift of God. He seldom reflects on the days of his life, because God keeps him occupied with gladness of heart.
So one of the takeaways, again, as we look at Ecclesiastes, nothing new under the sun, what would you say is one of the takeaways as we review what we have come to know already through previous readings and studies of Ecclesiastes? Michael?
Context. Blessings and prosperity God gives us. If we do good things to them,
Okay.
And remember, it just reminds what Jesus said. What good for one to give a world for himself?
All right, so again, how God has blessed us, and unfortunately, instead of, again, keeping in mind who is the one who blessed us, we start, as we said earlier, kind of looking at the things that we've been blessed with and now raising them up to be our God and salvation. And so like Jesus said in Mark, for example, what good is it to gain the whole world yet forfeit your soul? Again, another key takeaway as we go through this reminder is the fact that along those same lines, how applicable the scriptures are, still speaking to us today as they were speaking to the people then. Same root problem, still needs the same solution. The problem is not with the solution, right? It's what we do with that solution or fail to do with that solution. Ellie?
Nothing of our stuff is permanent,
Yes.
nor are we here on earth.
Nothing of our stuff or we are permanent, right? Steve?
Again, it's the love of money that's the evil. God may give you abundance, and if you're satisfied with it, it's a wonderful thing. And what you do with it. If he's decided you don't need that much, be happy with it.
Right? So again, the attitude through life is important, especially when it comes to our possessions. Describe again the times during Solomon's reign, just to help put this in context, what was going on. Solomon's reign, 40 years of what would you say?
Prosperity.
Prosperity, great wealth, peace, wisdom. Definitely, they became known for that. Fame, yeah, okay. What else do you think was going on during those 40 years?
Too many wives.
Too many wives, right? You know, that decadent living, in a sense. And there were a lot of construction projects going on. And was everybody happily part of that construction project? No, right? There's a lot of forced labor as well. And we see that in the transition of Solomon and Rehoboam. You know, you think, my father worked you hard, I'm going to work you even harder. So again, in a sense, I mean, you think of America, right? How would you describe America? You know, pretty much the same, right? You know, thankfully, there have not been a great abundance of attacks on our land. It's only by the grace of God. And military might is awesome, but only God can really stop and prevent things from happening to us. The peace, prosperity, and yet decadent, still forced labor in a sense, taken advantage of. So how timely, again, still the scriptures are to us, Ed.
It's hard for me to wrap my mind around the wealth that he had.
Yeah.
Tons of gold and silver and everything. It's just that small country.
Right? Yeah, the amount of wealth, right? Silver really didn't mean anything. It was all gold. Right? And still gold, right? Buy gold. You can't trust the market. No, I'm just kidding. That's unofficial advice. Strike that from the recording. I don't want to get in trouble. People have a tendency to spend what they have more than what they have, right? So again, nothing new under the sun, as Solomon talks about, which Steve touched on this, which then can lead to what? Never being content or satisfied. We're always trying to look for ways to earn more rather than spend less. And so sometimes those ways to earn more are not always up and up, or it can lead to distractions. You know, well, I really want to get that place in the Sierra, so Lord will understand if I work at the gas station on Sunday mornings and not go to church. And again, it's one thing if your work leads you to have to work, and so you miss the gathering together. But then oftentimes, more than we'd like to see happen, if you're not here, what other options do you have, right? I mean, with technology today, even before technology of the computer, live streaming, you had radio, you have reading the Bible yourself. You know how many people that aren't making up what they're missing here, making up for on their own, right? And that can lead then to foolish decisions, which then pierce people with many griefs. To be clear, describe the one who recognizes the importance of God as we go through this life and the one who does not? How would you describe either one or both in your own words? The one who recognizes the importance of God versus the one who does not.
Peace.
Peace. Okay, they're at peace on the inside, even though there still may be turmoil on the outside.
Satisfied with life.
Satisfied with life. Right? Wisdom versus foolishness. Okay? Not in a sense having a mindset, always looking for the next best thing. Again, it doesn't mean we can't improve ourselves. We can't have that next best thing, but at what expense? Right? That should not be the driving force. Like Michael said earlier, the possession becomes what we pursue, the God, rather than God himself. Think of, again, another comparison, right? The senseless worry that takes place, or the chasing after. Always chasing after something and may not achieve it. And again, at what expense? Think of the conclusion to the commandments, the sins of the fathers to the third and fourth generation. So as we were talking about earlier in the first section, if mom and her dad are becoming more and more world-like, what's going to happen to the next generation? They're going to become more and more world-like.
I think Jesus' words in Luke chapter 11 talk about the difference between what a Christian thinks and what a non-believer thinks, especially putting it back. If you're a believer and you're in the courts of the Lord, this is what you expect. But if you're an unbeliever and you're in the tents of the wicked, it also tells you what to expect. So Jesus says, "So I say to you, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives. He who seeks finds. And to him who knocks the door will be open. Which of you fathers, if your son asks for a fish, will give him a snake instead? Or if he asks for an egg, will give him a scorpion? If you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give the Holy Spirit to those who ask him?" So if you're in the courts of the Lord, your Father is the Lord, and he's going to give you a fish or an egg. He's not going to give you a snake or a scorpion. But if you're in the tents of the wicked, they're more than happy to give you a snake or a scorpion.
Right.
Something that doesn't give you, and they're certainly not sending you the Holy Spirit. So certainly that's something that's not going to give you peace or satisfaction.
Well, and again, it's another reminder too of, even if the earthly father knows how to give good things and provide for their children, how much more our Father in heaven. So never doubt the fact that God, our Father in heaven, has our best interests in mind. He's created us and He preserves us. And so our trust in Him is never misplaced, though in an earthly father at times may be misplaced. Good reminder there. Again, people think God should just do what for them? Yeah, give them what they want. Give them everything. Give them stuff. God, whoever may have what in mind for that person? Instead of giving you everything you want, or I may allow hardship to come into your life, and I will use that time of perseverance to draw you closer, to reflect back on the priorities of life. So it's not always through the giving. Again, a parent who gives everything they want to a child, is that really the best interest of that child? No, right? So the parent is to be the parent first, and those friendships can develop later. All the more so God's motives are pure. And then we get in, you can get into the active will of God and the passive will of God. The active will clearly revealed in His Word, what He wants for us. Go and live as salt and light. Go and be His witnesses. He's laid out the commandments as a guide versus His passive will, again, where He allows things to happen. Doesn't mean He's not aware. And then how He can use even, as we know, negative for our good, spiritual most of all. Which attitude of society gets under your skin the most? at this time and place? And what is your advice on how to not fall prey to it? Again, just in a couple minutes, we're not looking for the soapbox per se, but what is it that jumps out at you that really just gets under your skin right now? Okay, the push of immorality, right? All right, there's definitely a push for that, and it's emphasized in the lawsuit that's taking place against the Smithsonian, for example, as they kicked out all those who were wearing pro-life T-shirts. So there was an intentional move against those who were standing up for pro-life, and so now that institution is being sued because, again, where's the equality? Those who are pro-choice were allowed to walk through. Lying is so prevalent. Yep, good. Yeah, right. And again, starts in the home. We see it in our officials, unfortunately. Again. Yep, Steve.
The law of unintended consequences. Too many people have good intention, but they're very short-sighted with what's going to happen with it.
All right, the law of good intentions, but the short-sightedness that goes with it. So there are many, again, things that get under our skin. Nothing new under the sun. The key is not just to complain about it. What can we do to keep ourselves from falling prey to it? And also then be salt and light in the world. That's something you can give thought to on our own. Lord, help me find a way to, again, not only fall prey to it, but grow in your word and to help somebody else who maybe is falling prey to the logic or illogic of this world. Financial advice to pass along. Again, planning for retirement is important. Planning for heaven is essential. It comes back to the earlier conversation. Why does it take us to get a little gray hair in our head before we grasp that reality? But then not even everybody does at that age. How is the following statement factual? And how can we apply this truth to ourselves? To have Christ is to possess the highest wisdom and most priceless treasure. How is that factual, and how do we apply that? What does that statement say in your own words? To have Christ is to possess the highest wisdom and most priceless treasure. In other words,
it tells us what we need to do.
Tells us what we need to do.
Very simple. Priceless treasure. Heaven will be our home.
Heaven will be our home. We have a priceless treasure for this life and for the life to come. When we have Jesus, in a way, we really do have it all. Because God has promised to provide for our physical needs, and He does. Day after day, right? Sends rain on the just and the unjust. So again, He's given us what we need, because as we say, even if our life were to be snuffed out today, right? That statement reminds us we have a win-win perspective by God's grace. Outlook on life. And yet, what do we get caught up in sometimes? The worry. Jesus knows us, and so He says, don't worry. Again and again, don't worry. Don't be anxious. With thanksgiving, present your requests to God. Right? The answer is where we need to always keep our focus. And so that's why we're here. God help us keep our focus, because day in and day out, we lose our focus. We need to get refocused. And then He puts us in a position to help refocus others, but to do so in love. And so again, God be praised that His Word is applicable to every generation. And we need it more and more as we see that day approaching. So thanks for continuing to meet together. Have a great day in the Lord.